On this episode, we'll discuss rethinking church communications for maximum clarity. Well, hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast, the show that is dedicated to inspiring leaders and empowering healthy churches. I'm your host, Kendall Connor. So thrilled to have you with us today because we have an incredible guest planned. Let me tell you all about him. For over 18 years, Phil Bowdle has been serving in the trenches of creative ministry. Most recently, Phil served at West Ridge Church in Northwest Atlanta as the creative arts pastor. There, he oversaw worship, production, video, and the communications teams. Phil has a best-selling book called Rethink Communication, a playbook to clarify and communicate everything in your church, which has helped to shape the communication strategy for churches literally all over the world. And I actually have a copy of the book right back there on my shelf. I have personally read it and have enjoyed it and have been able to apply some of those principles in our own church, so I know it's a good one. Through Phil's work and coaching church leaders and serving as the VP of marketing at the Slingshot Group, it's in these places that Phil has been able to really just find that passion for clarity, finding that clarity in the chaos of ministry and equipping leaders to put Jesus on display. Today, we're going to talk about just that, rethinking church communication for maximum clarity. Today, I would say this, maybe your team is drowning in announcements. Maybe you feel like your messages that you're sharing on Sundays just aren't connecting by Monday, or maybe you just feel like you're trying to cut through all the noise and get people to actually hear what you're saying. If you've ever felt stuck in the chaos of church communication, wondering what to say or how to say it, or whether if anyone is even listening, I would tell you our conversation today is going to be for you. And I'm excited to jump in. I'd first like to encourage all of our listeners, hit that follow button wherever you are enjoying our show, or if you're over on YouTube, definitely hit that subscribe button. We want to make sure that you stay in the loop as we continue to release these conversations and provide these valuable resources. That is really the best way to make sure that you do not miss a thing. So without further ado, let's welcome Phil Bowdle. Hey, how are you there, Phil?
Kendall, doing great, man. Good to be here and look forward to the convo.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Again, I said it before when I was reading the bio, but to have the book back there, come on, that's a win, right?
It's awesome. Love it.
I love the work that you've been able to pour into the church and provide resources in that. Something that we always ask our guests, we have the public bio, and we know that that's always good. But can you tell us something that maybe doesn't make that public bio about you?
Man, that's there's a lot of ways this could go. I will start. Before communications and church ministry, a couple quick hits would be. I just wanted to be in a rock band. So that was what got me started in the creative space. So
no kidding.
Another weird, embarrassing fact: favorite movie, Dumb and Dumber. All-time
always
classic.
A win. Totally
no
redeemed yourself,
I'm embarrassed by how much of that movie I can quote.
A lot of quotables for sure.
The most random thing is I got to in 2008 I got to work in audio at the Beijing Olympics and got to chase Usain Bolt around the stadium after he won beat the world record and outran him and stuff. So, I mean, if you really want to go down rabbit hole, you can go down and look at some YouTube video and probably find me there holding a mic back in the day. So there's
I'm
going to
need that clip. I know you found that. I know you got the link. I'm going to need you to send that over.
Get that in the edit for sure.
And I don't want to skip right past this. You said the rock band. Okay. So are you playing an instrument or are you vocalist? How does that work?
I started with a guitar and then learned some bass and learned some drums. I don't know how to read music, but I could play most of it just barely enough by ear. And so I wanted to be ready whenever the moment happened, and that moment never happened.
Well, it sounds like because you've got the range there, you can always be like one man band with all of that. And there's probably some worship leader listening to this and thinking, yeah, I've been that one man band.
I was that one man band for a lot of years in worship ministry and stuff. So yeah, no doubt.
I hear you. That's awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your story. You've served in ministry roles, you're a communicator, a coach. What kind of sparked your passion for helping churches, especially when it comes to communications?
Yeah, like most stories of ours, my plan was not God's plan. It was not in my bucket list of wanting to work in the church and do all that. And, I shared about some of that before, but honestly, like I really just couldn't escape it. And I think for me, there's something special about when people can use their creative gifts and abilities to not only serve God, but be able to put him on display. And so I got to kind of that captured my attention and really my passion early on, really in helping see all those things that we talked about: worship, production, video, like that was, I think I had a reason to chase all of those things and for different reasons and probably different plans. And God really used that for me to bring all that stuff together and have a passion for putting Jesus on display through the church and stuff. So I grew up in the church and was blessed with amazing parents that still very much serve in church ministry and as a pastor and in children's ministry and everything like that. And so I feel super lucky that God had better plans than me and love anything I get to do to be able to serve the church and serve the people that are serving the church so well.
I love that. And I love that phrase, putting Jesus on display. I feel like that's something that anyone who's serving in communications and really any area of ministry, right, you can take that message to heart.
No doubt. I mean, that for me, do you want to give you the backstory on it?
Yeah, I love to hear it.
So that phrase, honestly, so it came from a somewhat embarrassing moment of doing one of my first like all team meetings with all of our creative team staff at Westridge, where I was creative arts pastor, all of our staff and all of our volunteers. And I was like, man, this is going to be great. Culture building. Like, it's going to be awesome. Yeah. And it was a moment where I'm like, okay, how I could speak to all those groups separately. Right. But what a challenge it is to speak next to in the same row of somebody that's a photographer, right next to somebody that's leading songs on stage, right next to somebody that is wearing black, of course, and on the production team, and all different passions, all different hearts, not everybody wanting to be on stage, some people terrified of the stage, but all here for the same reason. And it was just really realizing that that's the moment where at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is that very thing, is put Jesus on display. And it takes away some of the filter that I think sometimes we can have as artists and creatives to say, like, I like it and it meant something to me, or, I want this to look cool. I want it to be excellent. All those things can be great, but I think at the heart of what we're all really trying to do is put Jesus on display. I mean, especially in communications, what we're talking about today, it's not about making us look good. In fact, it's really allowing Jesus to do what he promised to do, which was allowing him to build his church. So we just get to put him on display and let him do his thing, and not worry about us trying to make ourselves or anybody else look too good, but make much of Jesus along the way.
Phil, I feel like we could wrap up right now. I think I got everything we needed. That was no, I love your heart on that. And I'm telling you, no matter where you're serving in the church, I feel like that is a message to take to heart. I love that. So let's dive into the communications piece, right? I know serving in a church, right? Been serving in a church for most of my life. Churches are often struggling. They're juggling multiple announcements, multiple things that have to be shared on a weekly basis. And my first question to you is, how can leaders know what is most important? Where do they need to start in figuring out, okay, where is the priority when it comes to communications?
Great question. It's really hard when you're working in day-to-day full-time staff ministry, is very quickly you start thinking like a staff member. You start thinking like the person that is working with, living and breathing all these things that we want announced all day, every day. Yes. And so I think where it starts is realizing that what we should announce is not always what's most important to us, but actually what's most important to the person we're advocating for the person we're trying to reach. And when we think about not what we have to say, but what we want people to hear and what do they need, things start to get a little bit more clear of what's most important. Yes. And so, there are some strategies and tactics to talk about in the book and coach people on. I mean, we probably shouldn't be announcing things that aren't reaching about 80% of the audience, or aren't a direct next step from teaching that is naturally happening in a sermon. Great tip. Or is like an on-ramp to a ministry. Those are all things that are worthy of of attention. But the reality is when we start thinking like staff members, we think more is better. And we start thinking, oh, we just need to say it, and naturally people will hear it. And I give the analogy in the book, and I was reminded by it last night after a couple flights on my way back from Denver. It's kind of like the in-flight announcements when somebody gets up and shares all those things at the beginning of a flight. I looked around, and I didn't notice anybody completely captivated by every word that my Delta flight attendant was saying about the instructions, because it just
Delta,
felt like
you at least probably had
say.
like the little video, right? You had the video in front of you.
Yeah, on one of the flights. The other one, it was just some poor soul just up there doing their thing and checking the box and stuff. So
and folks weren't listening, right? They were not a captivated audience.
Not one bit. Yeah. So I just think our role is to advocate for our audience. It's not to just tell people more. And I was recently doing a communications ministry assessment with a church. And often it's always amazing how quickly the filter builds of thinking like a staff member, not thinking like a advocate. Wow. And I made note of all of the announcements that were shared and asks that were made. And in the first, I believe it was in the first 8 minutes, there were 17 different asks between what was done on the screen, what was done on stage, and what was done in a handout. 17. Wow. And yet they were justifiably frustrated by the lack of engagement, even though all those things were great. And so when we try
break that down really quickly for us. So what were some of the asks that kind of contributed to that?
So some of that is just some natural in-service things of, hey, would you fill this out? We want to know about you, and we want to get in touch with you. If you're new, do this. If you'd like to serve, if you'd like to be in a group, if you'd like to do all, like, it was just some natural logistics that you could share about every week. There was also, announcements about multiple events that were coming up, and then references to more events that weren't talked about on the stage that were on the on the handout and all that stuff.
Right.
So somebody probably there was feeling like, hey, we did our job. We told everybody everything. Well, the person in the back row with their arms crossed is like, I don't know what's important to me, and you've given me a lot. You're not giving me a direct step. Yeah. I don't know where to start. And so we are putting all the baggage on the person instead of the burden on us to make sure that we're being really clear about what we're trying to communicate on that. And that's painful, Kendall, because sometimes that means really good things are having to be communicated in a different way or not at all. And I think that, I don't believe, even though this is hard to say and hear, fairness is not a value in communication. It can't be, because when you're trying to be fair, you're not actually being fair. You're not only not being fair to you, and especially not fair to the communications team trying to do it all. You're not being fair to the person that's just saying, "Hey, I want to follow God, and I'm counting on my church to help me take next steps in my faith. Can you help me do that?" Giving them, a laundry list of stuff isn't usually the best way to do it.
And anyone who's listening to this today that has served in church communications or has ever made a church bulletin or an email or delivered stage announcements, any of that, that tension, because leadership, or even if you are a senior pastor and you're thinking, okay, I know that it's our responsibility. You feel that weight of, we've got to make sure that folks know about all the things that we're doing. But what I'm hearing from you is that, okay, just because we have 20 things going on doesn't necessarily mean that all 20 things have to be communicated from the stage on Sunday or from, in every email. Is that kind of what you're leading to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there should be a next step and a way to communicate all those things. But some of the tips that I often give are, point towards a hub, point towards your website, to your app, or whatever it is where they can find out everything that is relevant to them and help make it easy for them to say yes to those things, whatever channel that is. So by communicating that brief thing once every week, that is their hub for finding out all the things, that's well worth 30 seconds. You don't need to say all the things that they're already going to find. Make it easy for them to say yes and know where they can find that, is definitely one thing and stuff. But the other thing is, nobody gets excited about the word announcement. In fact, to me, that's kind of a ugly word that I try not to say. I try to say next steps, because it really should be, if it's not a natural next step that people can and should take, then it just feels like an announcement. And that's probably not not why somebody's getting up early, wrestling their kids to get into the car and get to church. Like nobody's saying, hold on, I got to get there early. I don't want to miss the announcements and stuff. So we can reclaim a little bit of, this isn't what we want from you. We don't want you to just be busy with attending these events or doing these things. This is what God wants for you.
Wow.
We want to be a platform for response for you. And we as a church want to just help you take your next step towards Jesus, not just towards us.
Even that subtle change of language makes such a big difference in how much I'm engaged in hearing what you're going to talk about. Right. And I feel like, changing from, it makes me want to make sure that, am I telling my church, hey, we've got some announcements for you, or is it better to say some next steps? Such good stuff, such good wisdom. I'm kind of curious. I've heard you talk about before, clarity over creativity, right? And that's something that I feel like maybe is a little confusing at first, because as churches, we want to be creative, right? We want to have lots of creativity in our services. We're connected to our Creator, but we shouldn't have that at the sake of a loss of clarity. Would you agree with that? Can you unpack that statement a little bit for us?
Yeah. First, creativity is a great and beautiful thing. Yes. Like that, and something that God models and invites us into. So by no means is that something that's not a priority. I think, but when you really drill down to it, I think, especially in the church space, creativity is about solving the right problem. Wow. It's simply problem solving.
Yes.
And so sometimes, especially artists in the church, which again, there's a beautiful place for it. Look at Exodus 31. It's worth it. Like we need artists. But to me, and I think this is more, especially recent learning, and working with a lot of creatives, we often mistake creativity with art. And art is for the artist. Creative is for the audience. Art is really, there's great, beautiful artistic songs that are done by worship artists that some people love and other people were like, that's the worst song I've ever heard in my life. But you know what? Both are really okay, because it wasn't about the audience. It was about the artist and what they were trying to communicate. In the church, there should be room for that, but there should always be room for creative problem solving. And sometimes what we try to do is stick art on top of really simple problems, and we make them really complex and lose the audience we're trying to serve.
Wow.
So that's the approach side. But I think at the heart of it, we can't be creative if we don't find the problem we're trying to solve. And that's where the clarity piece comes in. If we don't have clarity about that, we might be missing completely the thing that we are putting so much energy and effort into, and solving the wrong problem. So that's up to us. Before we try to solve the problem, we got to make sure we're solving the right problem, and that takes clarity.
I love that. And, just practically speaking, I mean, where you see this play out in churches, like maybe you're crafting a sermon series graphic, right? You're going to have something to go with your sermon series, and you may have a graphic that looks beautiful. It may have the latest design techniques, but if it's unclear to your audience, to the folks that are sitting in the seats, you've muddied up the message, right? Like you've taken the place, and it can go to really any area of your communication. It's got to make sense. It's got to be clear. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes we just get excited. We want to try the latest thing or try ideas that we've seen in different places, but it could never come at the loss of clarity, right?
Well, and to add on to that, sometimes we solve the right problem for the wrong audience. Wow. We are inspired by, like, we see something that's happening at our church that we look up to and are inspired by, and we mimic that because they thought it was awesome and we think it's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's the most inspiring, engaging, young, hip, whatever you want to call it. And then they play it and look out to an audience that's not that church. And it might be a completely different audience with completely different needs. And that's a shame, because we're not honoring the context and the people that God's put in front of us. We're actually doing it for us, not for the person we're trying to serve. So clarity is critical on what we do and who we do it for.
That's such a great reminder too, that it's the cookie cutter approach, just doing something because another church has done it, is not really making the best of the unique group of people that God has put into your care, right?
No doubt.
I love that. I love hearing your heart on that. Let's talk practically. What are some common communication mistakes that you see churches making these days?
Well, we've hit on a couple of them, at least the certain aspects of it. Trying
Sure.
to do too much, trying to communicate too many things. In simplest form, I usually encourage churches find the 1 to 2 key next steps you want everybody to know, and use all your communication channels to tell a beautiful story about those next steps. So do 1 or 2 each week, and you might be surprised by how much more creative you're able to be, how much more strategic you're able to be, all those things. So those are all, like, that's in its simplest form doing that. The other mistake too is just purely we're not giving communication teams and creative teams enough time to do it well. Everything's reactive, not proactive. So
say it louder for the people in the back, man. I mean, I feel like this is gold.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I spent a lot of my early days talking to all the creatives and being one and being like, oh, if we just had more time, oh, if we just had more budget, if we just had this.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, I spend most of my time working with lead pastors, executive pastors that are like, we're trying, we're doing everything we know to do. And they're still like, they're just as a disconnect. And so, helping creative teams and communication teams be a partner in ministry, not just a service department, and not just being the vending machine to everything that every ministry wants. And ministry leaders having a vision and a passion and a goal in mind and saying, hey, let's work together. Take some time. And so when you take some time and plan out ahead, you realize you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So what are the most strategic things that we can focus on together to do? That just leads to way more healthy partnership and way more productive communication work along the way. So there's a couple things that really jump out that are really a thread across almost every church, big and small, that I see.
Man, there's so much to unpack there. I mean, creativity is a big passion of mine, especially for the church. And, I think I've been there so many times serving in my own church, right? Where you have that passion, you want to be creative, you have big ideas, but you're just the timeline, the deadline is just too tight. And I feel like the less time you have, the more just that creativity is just set to the side, right? It's pushed to the side. You just don't have time to be creative. And so I think that's a practical thing to take away from this is the more time you allow for creativity, the better your project is going to be, right?
No doubt. Yep. You know it. You've lived it.
And we know how it is. And I don't want to, paint it as you can't ever be creative in a pinch, right? Because some of your best ideas and creative moments are going to come when you're working against obstacles. But generally speaking, just the more time that you can build in there, and especially to make sure that your creatives on your team, lead pastor, or any leaders who have creatives working under them, it's going to help to keep them healthy, right? When you can give more time for it. So exactly. I love that. I think about churches. We're always trying to engage people outside of Sunday. We have this 1 hour or a couple hours during Sunday morning where we've got their attention. Do you have any practical advice for how churches can engage more than just Sunday morning throughout the week?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's becoming more and more challenging because there's more and more noise competing for you inside and outside that hour of a service. So it is not easy. And I think that's why, the amazing people serving in communications and in creative ministry have a way more challenging job than ever before. And that way it's easier to create and it's harder to get it noticed for all these things. So I think, if you are being simple about what those key next steps are each week and you are planning ahead, now I think one of the opportunities that I think we are losing is we're not creating accounts that we ourselves would want to follow. We're not communicating in a way that we would want to receive during the week. We are just trying to get the message out to not make ministry leaders or pastors upset with us. Wow. And so none of us want to follow the accounts on Instagram that are just full of ads and graphics, right? Like we want to see story, we want to see value, we want to see something that, that enhances and adds value to my life. And yet often we're like, okay, yes, we can post it. Yes, we can do it. Yeah. And it's not working, and it's just purely a challenge of, okay, we did all that we could do. So I think if we start creating accounts that we ourselves would want to follow and create content that we ourselves would want to hear, we start having way more fun and we start reaching way more people. So that's one piece. The other is thinking about, this may be too abstract, so edit this out, please.
I'm here for it.
we are thinking channel, not content first. So we're thinking, how do I fill up my social media feed? What do I put on my email? What do I do on whatever channels you have on the app, all that stuff? Yes. We're looking at those in silos instead of thinking of what makes this compelling content and how do I distribute that content effectively and creatively and tell the story of what's going on through those other channels. So that means we're spending less time just writing the blurb for the caption and more saying, why would somebody care about this new series that we're doing that we know is going to be awesome if people are there, but if they don't know about it, they're not going to be here. Like, what's the heart and the passion behind this, and how do we help creatively tell that story on social media? Well, that's probably going to be different than how you're going to do it on email and all that stuff. So I think if we really can focus on capturing a compelling who, what, when, where, how, and why for each message, and then saying, how do we reflect that and communicate that in all of our channels? Again, we have more fun and we're a heck of a lot more effective because it's just not carbon copy everything everywhere in an age where people can sniff that out. If it doesn't feel like it's for them and for that platform, they're going to say, this isn't for me.
I love that kind of shift in thinking, because again, if we can move away from everything being announcement driven, right? And social media channels, think about your Instagram and things like that. If we can move away from it just being another place to dump those announcements and really think about story, I think about how many church leaders are passionate storytellers, right? So many pastors that get up and speak on Sunday mornings, like telling a captivating story is something that comes naturally. It just somehow has to be reframed into a different context, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the churches I'm working really closely with worked producing like batch content for a couple of days and a couple of times in the year, just it literally filming like, 4 or 5 terabytes of content.
Wow.
And trying to produce stuff that is evergreen.
Yes.
That is not just to promote a series or not just to promote something. It's actually, hey, what's God teaching you right now? It's things like it's storytelling of things that nobody would know unless we showed them. It's hearing the real life stories and impact of what Jesus is doing in and through their church. And it's evergreen. It can just be posted, and it's actually like I forget the exact stat, but I went through. It was like 250% more engaging than the other regular announcement stuff going on, and has just made a massive difference strategically for reach and impact and how people are engaging in their content. Because it's like, oh, this feels like it's for me, not just to me. And so we just have the hard thing is most churches just say, yeah, that's great. I would love to do that, but we got to make sure we get the announcement video done. And so we just rob the real ministry opportunities sometimes from our teams because we're too focused on all the stuff that we need them to do instead of unleashing ministry through the very teams and people that can be today's messengers of the gospel. So I think it takes us as leaders, if you're in a leader seat, I would just encourage you, reallocate some priorities. It's time to create some margin for people to not just be the vending machine, but to think creatively about how we tell these beautiful stories that are happening in our church that nobody knows about because we're not giving it the time.
What a challenge, for every leader that's listening to this. I mean, I'm inspired. I hear things like this and it just kind of gets my wheels turning of, okay, if we really were to take a step back and sometimes we have to do that, right? The schedule is busy, no matter what seat on the bus you are in a ministry, in a church. It's valuable sometimes just to take a step back for a second and analyze what you're doing. Is what we're doing working? How could it be improved? Would it make a difference? Would it move the dial if we were to change this to this method? Or can we build in things like stories because I feel like we talked about this on a episode of a few weeks ago, but stories make a difference no matter where you plug them in. They inspire your volunteers. They're going to inspire people to get more engaged on your social media channels. Anytime you can build that in, maybe it's even, okay, you film something on a Sunday morning. Maybe you don't feel equipped and currently in your church journey, you don't have someone with those talents on board creatively. Even if you were to tell those work them into a Sunday morning experience, it would add value. Wherever you plug in story, it brings value. Yep. Would you agree with that?
Entirely. I mean, the number one volunteer team that I talk to more and more churches about is not the writing team or camera team. It's the story team. It's the person that's saying, you got one job today. Here's the story we're trying to tell about what God's doing through this unique service today. And that might be the story of a greeter, that just has just knows how to just love and encourage people when they walk through that door. Capture that. A team I work really closely with called Long Hollow in Nashville area, Hendersonville. They do such a brilliant job at this, of just highlighting little real moments that are happening, not on the stage, but behind the scenes somewhere. And it's compelling. Like, it's just, so we need to unleash some story teams and help set them up for success, because there's so much that is not getting shared that would just be really, really compelling and creative and inspiring to the very people we're trying to serve so well.
A story team or story person that's just dedicated to that is going to be a term or a phrase that's new to a lot of people, but that is something that could bring so much value to telling those stories in your church. Wow, I love that. So no matter where you're communicating, we've got lots of different places around our church that we communicate. Maybe it's your email or on Sunday mornings or on your social media channels. We've talked about branding some on our podcast before. I'm just kind of curious to hear your take on how do we make all this stuff look cohesive, right?
Yeah, this is interesting. I feel like I'm, I don't know if it's one you figure out because it's constantly evolving. So I'll just tell you things that I'm learning or working through with some teams right now is talking less about brand and more about essence. What's the essence of your church and how do you visually communicate that? And does everything align with that? So that, I don't know if that, again, may be too abstract, but it's something that I'm seeing spark more. Because when you think about brand, you're thinking about your style guide, your logo, here's how colors we're using. When you think about essence, you're thinking about what would we visually try to communicate that communicates that, like, the essence of Microsoft is very different than the essence of Apple. I could, without a logo, I could walk into each of their stores or feel each of their products and say, I know exactly which one this is because I know they are trying to do something different. Yeah. Well, what's the difference of your church compared to the one that's down the road or across the community for you? I bet it's different. And so how you tie in color, how you tie in texture, how you tie in your logo and brand, all those things is more about the essence of who you are and trying to match that. So I think that's one piece. And I'm seeing more and more churches that have a great logo, but a horrible brand because they're not thinking about their brand packaging and their visual identity. They're just thinking about how they use a logo. So there's a lot of layers right underneath that get skipped and they feel like the job's done when really it's far more about the aesthetic, the feel, like the textures, the colors, how those things are used, how they're layered over photos, all those kind of things. So all those things communicate something because everything communicates. So I think those are some of the things that we're maybe missing, that sometimes it takes like stepping away from it or bringing an outside voice in to say, this, you're saying you want this feels off. Here's some things maybe to kind of layer in and enhance what you're trying to do to more properly communicate the unique story God's telling through your church on that. So a couple things I'm learning.
Advice. Yeah, no, that's such great advice. And I feel like whether you're in a lead pastor role or any role, a creative role, any seat on the bus, I feel like that's something that we're all contributing to how it feels when you come to our church and the things that we're putting out there to communicate our church family. So such good stuff. I know that you've worked with churches of all sizes, right? I'm just kind of curious, what are some maybe scalable systems or habits that would work in any church to help them communicate better?
Yeah, I mean, again, the simplicity of what you're trying to communicate is, I know we hit on that, but I would put that over here as well too. That's sure. Something that honestly probably smaller churches struggle more with than bigger churches, because fairness feels more like a value in that context when there's just less people involved and voices feel louder on that. So I get that's just challenging, but it's still a very real reality, and often a lid that we place on ourselves when we try to do much with do too much with too little. So I think that's one major piece. I mean, the other, I would say, where I'm just seeing a lot of fruit is batching how you plan and how you create. So most churches, like I bet you've seen and lived in, have a little bit of a week to week cycle. It's Sunday to Sunday. Right. And it feels very quickly like a chaos cycle. You just can't feel like you get ahead, and you pull it together, you make it happen. And then, and then Monday's coming and you got to do it all over again.
That's right.
And, where I'm seeing a lot of healthier culture being built is by moving more away from that reactive week to week approach and more in a proactive trimester ministry planning approach.
Okay.
So looking at how you plan your sermon series, how you plan your ministry calendar, your creative, communication plan, your storytelling, like service elements, those things, not thinking about it week to week, but thinking about it across January to April, May to August, and September to December, because there's some natural ebbs and flows that happen across the year in that way, beginning of the year to post Easter, before summer to after summer, fall launch to post Christmas, and all that. And so zooming out a little bit further and having a chance to audit and assess, are we at where we want to be? Here's where we're going. Allowing visionary leaders to be able to speak into where you're going, all that stuff, and then say, okay, here's how it's going to flesh out. Here's what we're going to do. And here's how that practically applies for each week of the year. That I've seen that work in big church and small church. And align teams in ways where they're not wasting as many hours in meetings, and more batching that time to get more done in less time and unleash far more creative work and more effective ministry across the board. So it's kind of for communication leaders' survival, but it's as much for that as it is also for ministry leaders to know, I know what the heck we're doing, not just in my ministry, but other ministries, and how those all align and stuff. So definitely seeing a lot of fruit in that.
What I love about that concept and just planning out further is that you can have a big theme throughout different times of your year, and every area of your church can be focused on one thing and going towards one direction. And that is powerful when churches get in sync like that, because, you're not all in silos doing your own thing, right? The same thing that your kids are learning in kids ministry, can also be paired, but possibly with your sermon series, can be aligned with what events you're having in that season. And it just allows for people for different areas of the church to come together, and it just makes a huge difference. So I love that. So a big theme for our podcast is we talk about healthy churches and healthy leaders a lot. And I'm just kind of curious, in your opinion, and maybe as it relates to this area of your area of expertise, what do you think is one essential component of a healthy church?
That's a whole nother podcast. That's a big one.
I understand. It's a loaded question, but, maybe just from your lens and maybe to speak to communications and that kind of theme.
You can't have a healthy church and healthy teams without healthy leaders. And I know that sounds like a cop out, but I've seen it time and time again where that has rung true, and so to be a healthy leader, which is all of us, because we're building something and leading something bigger than ourselves with other people that are looking to us for leadership. The healthiest leaders I know are self-aware. They know themselves so that they can lead themselves. Yeah. And they're self-aware enough about their strengths, but also their weaknesses and where they need other people. So they know themselves so they can lead themselves. They know their team so that they can lead them effectively. Just like my kids, I've got a 10-year-old and 6-year-old, very different. Both amazing, but I cannot know my family team. I can't lead them well or serve them well if I don't know them well and know their strengths, their challenges, how they're at their best. So that it's not their job to adjust to me. It's my job to adjust to them. Same as with leadership.
Wow.
It's not everybody. If you're the boss, it's actually your job to serve, not to be the one that everybody else adjusts to and tolerates. So when we can know our team well, we can bring the best out of them. And it's to know our why, to know our conviction about why we exist and why we do what we do, because the hard day is coming where we are questioning, does this matter? Does it make a difference? Do I care? Like all those things.
Yes.
If we don't have clarity about our conviction, about why we exist and why we do what we do, we can't have a healthy team because we're chasing the wrong things. So that's the flow that I often look at. And when it comes to the healthiest teams I've seen, they usually have leaders that are operating that way. And they fight for healthiness, because it's so easy just to be a functional team instead of a remarkable team. So when we're just functional, we kind of are like, it's good enough. It's okay. But really, none of us just want to be functional. We definitely don't want to be dysfunctional. We definitely don't want to be one of those that is known as toxic. So for us to do that, we gotta be healthy as leaders individually so that we can lead healthy teams.
What a great message for today. And, I feel like if someone listening to this today only took that back to their church, I feel like it would make such a huge difference. So what an encouraging word this morning. Before we wrap up today, Phil, something we always like to do is a final 5, kind of a rapid fire round. Are you up for the challenge do that today?
Challenge accepted.
All right, let's jump in. I'm kind of curious, what's one book on this subject, or maybe something similar, that you would recommend to church leaders?
There's a number of great ones. One of my all-time favorites is Tribes by Seth Godin. It's one of his earlier books, but one that just speaks to the needs of a tribe and community and leading them. So there's so much that I've learned from him. He's like the Yoda for me of marketing and communication. So love his stuff, but that's one of the books that I think about and reference a lot. So if there's one hidden gem that's been out there for a little bit, that would be one that I'd recommend.
Awesome. What is the last thing that you listen to on Spotify, Apple Music, or maybe even on podcast?
I do all those things quite frequently and had a day of flights and travel. Goodness. Podcasts, I probably have like 30 of them mixed from communications and sermons to, I'm a long suffering Cincinnati Bengals and Reds fan. So some podcasts to just sulk in my suffering as well too, on those things and stuff. But, so I'm good friends with Mac Lake, who is, his son is Brandon Lake. He's got some new stuff coming out, on his latest album that is awesome, that my kids love as well too. So I'll give him a shout out and
Always
say that's the one.
Yeah. And Mac Lake's books on for church leadership and building teams. I mean, those are great resources.
They are the best. Yes.
Yeah, they're definitely worth mentioning. That's awesome.
Me and Matt go back to working at Westridge when he was starting our church planning stuff there. And I have distinct memories of him getting a Apple computer for the first time and just bringing it to my office. Like, I
check this out.
Don't know what to do and stuff. So we've been through it.
I think some of his books are back there on the shelf too. So
you need to have him on. You need to have him on if you haven't already. He would be a great guest.
That would be amazing. Yeah. And of course, Brandon, who doesn't follow his songs these days? That's awesome. Favorite piece of technology or software right now?
A lot of the creative stuff that I do is often video driven. And so I'm using DaVinci Resolve a ton. I made the switch from Premiere to that, and it doesn't crash as much. So I'll give that. That's probably been something I live in a decent amount and really enjoy on that. And then the writing for writing content and books and any ideas, I use an app called MindNode.
Say it one more time. What's it called?
MindNode. Okay. It's a mind mapping software, and it will change your life. Like there's not much of anything that I try to process through or think through that doesn't live first in a mind map on MindNode. So
I've got to check that out. And for everyone who's listening, for the video software DaVinci, that's a free software. At least there is a free version, right?
Yep. Yep. There's a studio version that's got a few more features, but
Yeah.
you're going to be able to do pretty much everything you need on the free version and stuff. It's incredible.
There's someone who's listening to this today and they're thinking they're paying a lot for their Adobe and they're just like, wait a minute, maybe I need to check this out.
It might be time. Yes.
That's awesome. All right. What about, is there a quote or maybe some advice that's kind of stuck with you over the years?
I would say, it's probably, a couple that come to mind. I'm giving you more than you asked for, but one would be you can't lead somebody somewhere they don't want to go. And so I learned that the hard way of just because you want it for somebody doesn't mean they want it for themselves. So it's your job to serve faithfully for them, lead them well, but also you can't make them on that. So that's just a leadership thing that I'm reminded by a lot. And the other one is just faithfulness over fruitfulness. Knowing like most, I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years in Hebrews 11 studying the heroes of the faith and knowing all those, like if you underline the word by faith in that chapter, you'll underline a lot and realize that the heroes we look up to and the people that just left a mark in history and in our faith did it by faith. And when we can do that and focus on faithfulness, God gets to manage the fruit and we don't have to worry about it as much. We just got to worry about being faithful. And so, especially in seasons that are hard, challenging, that's the thing I constantly have to remind myself of on that is faithfulness over fruitfulness.
Wow. God is faithful. He calls us to be faithful too. That faithfulness is a big deal.
Yep.
What's one thing that you would like to communicate to our audience of church leaders today?
Don't play it safe. Yeah. I mean, we've got the greatest opportunities we've ever had to communicate the gospel. We have a culture and a next generation that is hungrier for not a fake Jesus, but the real Jesus.
Wow.
And more opportunities to tell people about that than ever before. So for what's at stake, don't you dare play it safe. Like there's too much at stake. There's too many, there's plenty of distractions we can deal with that we have to go through. There's tons of obstacles we have in place. So we can't go at it timid, like for what's at stake, for what God's given us, the opportunity and the season that God's called us into. Don't you dare play it safe. That's my encouragement. And that's my challenge.
I love that. So good. This has been an amazing conversation. I know that our listeners are going to want to hear more from you and find out more. What's the best place for them to follow you and stay connected with your work?
I'm probably too busy working with churches and not enough doing like Instagram and all the things. So you can still check out just at Phil Bowdle or at Phil Bowdle on Instagram, Facebook, all that. And then my website is just Phil Bowdle, BOWDLE.com. And you can get in touch with me on there. My phone number is in the back of the book as well too. So if you have that, feel free to text me and connect that way. Love being able to connect with people all over the place.
Very cool. And definitely check out that book. I'm telling you, that was something before we've got to talk together in person. That was something I knew you from that. And it made a difference in how we communicate in our church. So awesome. Thank you for everything that you've poured into the Capital C Church. And thank you for this conversation today. It has been awesome.
Thank you so much. Had a blast, Kendall. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And, for everyone who's listening today, I would just encourage you, we're going to link up all of those things in the show notes. Definitely go and check out those resources. And, I would just say for any church leader, if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of the messages that your church is juggling in this season, just remember that clarity is possible and your words matter. I love that we said that everything communicates, everything speaks. And so this stuff really does make a difference. Every announcement, every email, every post, is really just your chance to, as Phil said, to put Jesus on display. So what a good message to take out of this today. And so everything that you're doing, communicate and lead with intention, communicate with heart. Don't be afraid to rethink what's been done and really lean into what matters most because it does make a difference. And I would tell you today, if today's episode has encouraged you, would you consider sharing it with a friend? Share it with someone who's serving in ministry. Leave a review to let us know what you think. If you're over on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment for us. Let us know if you have tried any of these communication strategies in your church, we'd love to hear from you. Keep spreading the word, because it helps us to be able to keep equipping leaders just like you. And until next time, I would just say keep leading well, and we will see you right back here next time on Church Leadership Lab.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.